So the directors, the CEO, myself, we were on there. Every day we'd go through flags from clients and figure out how we were going to fix those with the rest of the team before they turned into a massive escalation and a churn. So really the proactive approach had a huge impact on those numbers.
Well, again, I love a number of things about that. First of all was having the strategy sessions for the next quarter built into the reporting session. So it wasn't just a here's what we did and then leaving them guessing as to what you're going to do about it, but having that, because if things weren't quite working, like we have a strategy how to fix it, or if they are working, here's we're going to amplify it. So having that forward thinking and forward looking gets people excited to want to stick around and see those results. Your business's success depends on relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Ponto. Each week, I bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week, I'm excited to connect with Sarah Magana. She is the owner of Last Light Collective, a consulting company for agency owners advising them on how to improve client retention. Her previous agency enjoyed the lowest churn percentage and lowest revenue loss in 4 years, with revenue loss reduced by 56% year over year. A 2-time Hermes and .com Platinum Award winner, Sarah specializes in building the processes, frameworks, and team cultures that keep clients and revenue from walking out the door. Congrats on keeping clients from walking out the door, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Thank you, Carl. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on the show to talk about strategies for improving client retention, because it seems like it's not just in the agency world, but a lot of businesses struggle. They put so much into their marketing and sales, and then they don't invest nearly enough in retaining the clients they already have, despite knowing that it's like 95% easier and cheaper to retain the ones you have, but they still see that client retention is almost like a cost center instead of a revenue center. So I'd love to hear how you approach client retention and building the processes and systems that companies can use to keep those relationships going.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point. So a lot of times the agencies do really focus on the sales side and not as heavily on the service side, but retention is a factor in growth, right? You can bring in as many sales as you want, but it's kind of like, when you're budgeting your money, it doesn't matter how much you make, you have to save money if you want to have money. So with the clients coming in, it doesn't matter how many new clients you bring in, but you're never going to grow unless you keep the clients that you're bringing in, right? You got to stop that churn. So what I found in my years of experience working at agencies is that a huge foundation is that human to human connection, right? The account manager relationship that they have with the client is really a large factor in the client deciding to stay, even when performance is bad. But outside of that, there are multiple things that I would recommend to an agency to help them retain the clients that are coming in. And one of those things is proactively showing value to your clients, not waiting for them to ask, making sure that you're bringing up every week in your reporting call how you're performing on the metric that they care about, right? So if you're talking about impressions, but the client really cares about revenue, you should be talking about revenue in your reporting, figuring out a way to get that number, that information, and sharing that with them. Also proactively doing quarterly business reports for them to show before they have to renew the value that you are bringing. If a client ever has to ask how we're doing, I think the account manager is already a few steps behind, and that's not going to go well. And then one other major thing that I recommend is if you have an account manager that's working with a client, you want to give them another point of contact to check in with them outside of their day-to-day point of contact. So we found that clients don't feel comfortable complaining to the account manager that they're working with on a daily or weekly basis. But if you have their manager come in or a client success person come in and check in with them weekly or monthly, that goes a long way to helping the client feel like they do have an outlet for those frustrations, a safe outlet where no one's going to get offended. And then that person can go in and help make the changes that the client needs to see in order to stay. That's a way to get in proactively before their frustrations, their silent frustration, snowballs into a churn.
Yeah, so many great tips right there. Kind of feel like I'm drinking from a fire hose. Let me back up on some of the amazing things you said there, which was the proactive nature of the reporting and also reporting on what the client actually cares about. Because especially in the agency world, there's so many vanity metrics or things that are low hanging fruit to track, but don't really mean much to when it comes to actual revenue generation, at least not directly. And so having and it partially helps to have if you're able to talk with the sales team on the client side and get more information from them and not have your account reps or your CSMs having more points of contact than just their representative at the company so they can get more of that holistic sense of how what you're doing is actually impacting the company's bottom line. Because that there's a lot of the dashboards and tools that people kind of get in the habits of using are great at the superficial low hanging fruit and having all these things that look green and great, but they don't communicate the real value that you're delivering. And until you can deliver or explain that value in terms that your clients actually care about, which like I said, can be revenue and the cost of acquisition lowering, all these other things that are really move the needle, especially for the people that aren't in the marketing space, like the CFO or like the CEO and stuff. Like if you get them to go, oh, wow, I'm impressed with that, then they're much more likely to stick around because so often the decision to churn is done in a room where you're not involved and they're looking at a budget list and looking at how much are we paying this, so we're getting the value from it, not look at all these flashy impressions and views and stuff like that they don't really care about, but agencies get enamored with.
Yeah, that's really where the proactivity comes into it. The higher up you get in the ladder and the people that are signing, the checks to work with your agency, they don't care about these little vanity metrics. They care about revenue. And so it's important to proactively flag that to your decision maker so they're flagging that up. You can even ask your decision maker, or your point of contact, what do you need to see to make you look good to your boss? And then that helps them.
Great question.
Yeah, it helps them get that report that they need. I mean, then they look good, you look good, you're getting them to stick around for another 6 to 12 months. So.
Yeah, that what do you need from me to look good to your boss? Also, it goes beyond that transactional relationship that so many of the check-ins get into, where it's just like you ask, like, how are you? And you're already moving on to the next thing before they answer your question. And it becomes very much just kind of box checking exercise and not a real like relationship building check-in. And so I think that having that specific question of what do you need from me to look good to your boss shows that not only are you trying to help the person across from you, but help them, not just helping the client, but like the person, the human being across from you. I want you to look good to your boss so that you don't have to sheepishly give this report saying, hey, we're not really getting much from these guys, but it's, oh my gosh, we're blowing things out of the water and things are going really well. And it has that personalization to the touch that you just don't get from your standard QBR checklists that so many people work with. And I also like what you said about having the other point of contact that the client can vent to, because when you have those regular reports, there is some of that, it's hard to bring up the touchy subjects or like an event. You only have one point of contact. And so I really like that advice of here's someone you can kind of express concerns to that is going to be able to make some changes or talk to the regular report and actually get things to change before they blow up. Because so often if you ask people like how everything's going well, like fine, like, yeah, things fine. But again, fine is nothing's ever fine. There's always some problem. And so giving a channel for that pressure to release rather than letting it build up is really important.
Yeah, that's
and from that stat I mentioned in your bio, the 56% year over year, what was that like in the case story behind that? Like, what were the circumstances? How did you achieve that? Because that's something I'm sure a bunch of people listening like, I want that result. What was the story behind that amazing result?
Yeah, definitely. That was that was a huge stat for us. I was very proud of that. So a lot of it was a proactivity. So mandatory QBRs, especially for channels that don't always show value. So one of those channels is SEO. It's organic. It's, more of like, hey, you're on page 1 for this term, which is great. But again, clients care about revenue. So when clients were coming up for renewal, we mandated that the account managers were creating reports that showed the value we were bringing, which really helped improve the retention rate for that service. And then QBRs for clients who had a set number of services. Our top clients, those were mandatory. And those are omni-channel QBRs. So that would be across paid media, creative, Amazon, email. And those things they were a lot of work. It takes a lot of work from the account managers to put that together, but it really was effective in retaining clients because it would give a quick look back at what we did the previous quarter, but a lot of it was strategy for the next quarter, which inspired the clients to stay around. Hey, this team really has a plan for me. I'm really excited to get moving into the next quarter to see what we can do. And then another thing was that we created a daily stand-up meeting with the leadership team. So the directors, the CEO, myself, we were on there. Every day we'd go through flags from clients and figure out how we were going to fix those with the rest of the team before they turned into a massive escalation and a churn. So really the proactive approach had a huge impact on those numbers.
Well, again, I love a number of things about that. First of all was having the strategy sessions for the next quarter built into the reporting session. So it wasn't just here's what we did and then leaving them guessing as to what you're going to do about it, but having that, because if things weren't quite working, like we have a strategy how to fix it, or if they are working, here's we're going to amplify it. So having that forward thinking and forward looking gets people excited to want to stick around and see those results. So I think that's genius. And also I like the daily stand-ups with the leadership team, especially the C-suite level people, because that way they actually know what's really going on, and having that context of not just the 10,000 or 30,000 foot view that many of them are often operating on, but having that kind of 10 or 100 foot level, like here's what actually is happening with these clients. Here's the flags, like I said, addressing the flags when they're just tiny little like handheld flags, not a giant like building sized or like parade sized flag. That's a huge problem. So, and also when you can report to the client that like the executive level people are getting involved, that also shows that you're taking their account seriously and you're not just going through the motions with them. So even if you're not able to address the problem right away, letting them know that the senior level people or like executive level people are involved, communicates that you care enough about their relationship to get those people involved, and that can be enough to keep things going long enough to actually solve the problem instead of them kind of flipping a table in frustration because it seems like yeah, I saw those flags, but we don't care enough to really address it.
Yeah, that's a huge thing, is showing how much you care to the client, and I think escalating things and saying, hey, I'm looping in our VP of client services, or hey, I'm looping in our CEO, it really shows the client that you care. And a lot of times clients are coming from other agencies where they've been burned. And so they're very sensitive to that. They don't want to feel like just a number. They want to know that they matter to you and your agency. So yeah, the escalation to higher levels is an effective tool for that.
And then there's another thing that keep in mind is because they've been burned, but if your agency has operated like this for a while, it might just seem normal for you. So you don't think it's worth sharing with your clients. Mm-hmm. But it's something, and it's often some people like they don't put in their marketing or even in like their sales pitches when they're trying to bring in new clients. But because of how often people get burned like that or have bad experiences, communicating, hey, this is how we operate. This is what you can expect from us. If there are these flags, we're going to get these sort of people involved, the VPs and the executives, and communicating that is going to be really important, because it is what seems like such a, doesn't everyone do this? No, they don't. And so if you don't communicate that, they're not going to realize that it's what's going on. Mm-hmm. And so that keeping them in the loop and that transparency is really important, even though people think of like people not being transparent because they're trying to hide something bad, but this is just not realizing how good of a thing you're doing and not communicating that value in a way that your clients will understand and appreciate is often just like shooting yourself in your own foot, because you're doing way more for them than they realize they should realize it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Highlighting that is important.
So for someone who's like a founder who's losing sleep over client retention issues, what is kind of the first steps they should take to understand where their problems are and what they can do to fix it? What's a good first step?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, they should talk to the leadership of their teams. Sometimes founders might get like snips of things from clients, but it's not always the full story. So I would say go to the team first, find out from your directors like what they think is going on, maybe have like a group team meeting, and then maybe meet with a few clients and hear about that as well. Or you can call in someone like me who will do that for you, and then I can clearly summarize what the issue is and help you build a process for how to fix that.
Yeah, I think that's admitting you don't know what the problem is and taking the steps to actually solve the real problem is important, because so often people are aware of the symptoms, and so they just try and treat the symptoms of the problem and not actually addressing the real cause of the issue is basically lets it fester and gets worse. And especially if you're only, like I said, operating at that 30,000-foot view, you don't really understand what's going on in the guts of the business. And so you're talking with the clients and their directors, and I think even like the frontline people like the CSMs, like, hey, what are you hearing from people? What's a common, because if you hear the same sort of thing from all your different clients, the things they're not happy with, that's probably a good indication that you're on the right track. And then what's kind of the timeline for this that you've seen work from, like going from okay, we identify the problem to actually solving it? Because it's, with how much value is at stake here, you don't want to wait too long, but you also got to make sure you do it right. So is there like a timeline you've seen that kind of you can expect to get this turned around?
Yeah, and it's not short either, right? So understanding the problem is just the first part of it. Then you have to go in and identify how to fix it and then create the processes to fix it. You know, it's one thing if like you've got the C-suite saying, hey, we need to do X, Y, and Z, but then the directors have to figure out how that looks for their teams. And as you get down to the bottom, there gets to be more and more room for it to become murky. So that's the next thing. So I would say it can take 3 to 6 months to really identify the problem, come up with the processes, and then get those processes rolled out to the rest of the team in a way where the client, who's, you know, at the very bottom of the ladder meeting with the CSMs, are feeling the change. So it takes a while.
Yeah, and that time frame is important because you want to, from the leadership perspective, you flip the switch, made the decision, and you don't realize that it's going to be that long of an actual like time to turn the boat. Yep. You're still likely to be dealing with some issues, and so like if you don't have the runway for that, could be, so the ability, the leeway you have in waiting to make these changes is a lot shorter than you'd think. You got to really get going now for it to actually pay off in time before catastrophic things happen. So it's something that people think when they think about systems and processes and stuff, they think, oh, we can just make this change, but they're not understanding that the people involved in implementing it, getting their behavior to change and to build those new habits and understand properly, and then for it actually to like ripple through all the teams. That's the human part of it that is essential for this to work, but also takes time because people change at different rates and they're often resistant to changing if they know it's important, and just habits take a long time to develop. So it's, when you're thinking about that change management, understanding not just what has to change on paper, but then the behavioral change is tricky. Do you have any like tips on how to implement that side that you found works when you're working with teams?
You really have to get the team's buy-in, right? Like, hey, and you would do that by saying, hey, you know, account manager, this is what we're going to be changing over the next period of time, and here's how it benefits you, right? Like, this is actually going to be more work up front to do this quarterly business report, but, you know, what's going to happen is you're going to reduce your retention rate. It's going to help, you know, if you're making commission off of number of accounts worked or things like that, that's going to help you. So it's packaging the way you announce it to the teams to get their buy-in is going to make it easier for you to roll out those processes across all of these people down the organization.
Yeah, I think, and just to clarify, I think you said reduce your retention rate, reduce the churn rate,
reduce
right?
Churn, increase retention.
Yeah,
yes.
okay, so I'm going to clarify, yeah. Because and I think it's framing it in that understand. And so part of it is like, if you're an executive or a founder, you haven't been talking with them, you don't really understand what their experience is like. It's hard for you to frame it in a way that it puts it in a good light for them. So having those conversations with them to understand what is actually going on right now in the problem diagnosis stage will help you make those conversations more effective when you're trying to explain the value of the changes for them to get them on board. Otherwise, yeah, they're going to dig their heels in and avoid making the changes, and it's not actually going to stick in a way that brings the results your business needs. Well, thank you so much for connecting with me today, Sarah. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection Podcast, please like, leave a subscription, and leave a comment. If you want to learn more about myself or Sarah, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.